Hi, good night, Tobago, good night. Once again, thank you for joining us live on For the Hour. My name is Edison Thomas, and I will be guiding tonight's discussion as your host slash moderator. All right, I hope you had a great Monday so far, an awesome weekend. I hope you had a great start to your week and a productive start to your week. We know that we still are reeling and dealing with the effects of the oil spill off our shores. And I just want to say thanks to all the persons who would have volunteered so far to do their part in order to help with the cleanup and the fallout from the effects of the oil spill. I think that we have been doing a wonderful job so far. We have, or the agencies that have been called out to do their part have been doing a wonderful job so far, especially with the cleanup of Scarborough. I think in about a few days or so, the oil in Scarborough is mostly dissipated, right, off the shores there by the port. And really and truly, if that oil really made its way down to where the port was, that would have been real problems, right? So I want to give kudos to Tima, kudos to Cert and all the persons there who would have rallied their resources, rallied the volunteers, the 1,000 volunteers strong, that team, those who were really able to pull us out of that hole. And it's still not over because we have a lot of other cleanups to do, a lot of wildlife to clean up. And we still don't know how much oil is still remaining on the crash vessel, right? And so we're just hoping that gets tied up, and whoever is responsible really gets held to account for that, because really and truly it's a disaster. And when it is that we have oil spilled by these big companies, and these companies usually spend to the tune of billions in cleanup efforts, because it really calls for that amount of resources in order to get back to where we were before. It's never 100%, but we try, to get back to where we were before. So again, kudos to everyone who is actively playing a part to helping us getting back and cleaning up the oil spill. And we hope that it continues in stride and we get Tobago looking clean, green, and serene once again. All right. But tonight we want to switch gears a little bit, and we want to talk a little bit about economics, or money, which is one of my favorite topics. Recently we would have had the 117th report of the Salary Reviews Commission, which is a report that is put out by, you could see, a government-appointed committee to review the salaries, or independent committee to review the salaries of government, or I wouldn't say public service, but government employees, whether it be politicians, the president, the prime minister, the MPs, so the judges. All of those positions are called into, their salaries are reviewed, and they are posted in a periodically a nice little report. The Salary Review Commission would obviously do their studies to see what should the proper remuneration of each position would be. And I think under that, there are about over 270 positions. Not just the ones that we see, but there are many more that they are responsible for reviewing the salaries for. And obviously the allowances and other benefits. Okay, so we're going to talk about that tonight, and just to frame it up, right? Just to frame it up, and also we want to look at it from the Tobago context, with the Tobago House of Assembly context, because those positions were also included in the report. All right, is in addition to the largest positions in Parliament and government, right? So just to give you some numbers, right? I don't want to get to give the viewers too much number, overwhelming with the numbers. But the salary of the Prime Minister, it's proposed by the SRC to increase from $59,680 per month to $80,000 per month. All right. And just on salary alone, that would, excluding the allowances, that would amount to about $4.8 million per term over the 5-year term that a prime minister serves. The president is recommended to move from 64,270 to 73,920, which would be in the first time in history where a prime minister earns more than the president. So the head of the government would earn more than the head of the state for the first time if this goes into, if it's passed in parliament, right? The MPs, I'm not going to go through everything that we have here. I'm just going to go through the most important one. The MPs, these are the ones that just has the MP position, recommended to move from 17,410 to 20,668. All right. The government ministers recommended to move from 41,030 to 47,500, which amounts to about, in salary alone, amounts to about 2.2 million per term, which is the 5-year term. All right. Leader of the opposition recommended from 29,590 to 47,005, right, which is the same 2.2 mil per term. The chief secretary, so we're going on to the THA now. The chief secretary recommended to move from 41,030 to 47,500. All right. With allowances, this goes up to 54,000 per month. All right. Which would amount to 2.5 or 2.6 million per term. And the term is 4 years. All right. For the THA. Deputy chief secretary recommended to move from 25,240 to $37,000 flat, which is 49,000 with allowances. All right. The secretaries, recommended to move from 24,370 to 34,900, which with allowances is 47,000 per month, right? Approximately, which works out to about 2.256 million per term, 4-year term. And lastly, the assistant secretaries, it's 31. Well, they didn't say what their current salary is, but it says that it's stated to go to 31,000, and the current, the salary, would be recommended 41,000 with allowances. All right. So to discuss this, we have with us tonight, no stranger to the show, Mr. Max James. Max, welcome to the show. Max is a former assemblyman with the Tobago House of Assembly, and also quite versed in labor matters and industrial relations. Also, we have on our joining us virtually, Mr. Clyde Weatherhead. Clyde would have joined us in our prior discussion. We were talking about industrial relations. Mr. Clyde is a former president of the Public Service Association and a current practicing attorney at law. All right, Clyde, are you here with us? Are you hearing us? We're working on getting Clyde to join us. All right, so we'll do that in the background. But until then, let's carry on the discussion. Mr. James, good night.
Good night.
Nice to speak with you once again. Right?
You're most welcome.
I'm so happy, that we have guests that could speak on so many topics, and we have eminent minds in Tobago. We could speak on politics, we could speak on economics, we could speak on labor and all of these different things that you brush and have experience. You have a lot of experience in these spheres. All right, so but let me have a discourse tonight about these salary raises, and what are your initial thoughts on the increases that you see recommended? They're not, and just to clarify, they are not passed yet. So these are not current salaries. They are recommended by the Salary Reviews Commission.
Well, good night to the viewers. Edison intent, to frame it in a particular way. Intent is a hell of a thing. As you know, in law, there's something called mens rea, intent, and actus reus, the actual commission of a particular act, right? Now, so is it the intent of the Salary Reviews Commission, and they've actually gone on to propose these increases for on behalf of persons who fall under the remit in respect of salary allocation. Let me put it this way. Perhaps saving for Miss Martian, I think it is, a former CPO. None of them have ever walked the sands of Scarborough. None of them have ever walked the sands of San Fernando to La Brea.
So you're saying the sands of Scarborough, like when Scarborough was sand?
No.
Oh, okay.
Meaning haven't walked
in Scarborough.
The ground.
Right.
Get you. So it's figurative.
Right, okay, right.
To say that they've never held a flag or placard in protest for anything significant, and yet they are given the task of telling the nation what the salaries should be. In other words, they don't come from a background of negotiations.
Correct.
They haven't come from a background of standing up for anything when it comes to salaries and negotiations. And they're called upon to do this thing. They don't have a history of reporting on time. So I will try to frame the discussion by going way back. And I want to focus my own comments on the history of salary increases in the Tobago House of Assembly in particular. All right. So when we were in power under the NER in 1996 to 2001, the salaries report came back almost at the end of our term.
Right.
And we had to fix, the Executive Council had to fix salaries for on behalf of assemblymen, including I think the Chief Secretary's salary was fixed, I think, at the time. More or less, I think so. However, after the term finished, the Secretary for Finance said, well, you know, the salaries you paid yourselves, those salaries were too much and over what the Salary Reviews Commission eventually awarded us. And even if you go further backward from in the time of 1980, when the first Tobago Assembly Act was passed, Act number 37, 1980, and prior to that, you had secretaries working for like $2,500,
right,
$3,000, $4,000. In my case, I was receiving $9,000.
Right.
And today, weren't it for own initiatives, we would be suffering in terms of a salary and income.
And that salary was flat. You had any like allowances or anything like that, or was just
flat? In that case was a flat salary.
Okay.
So just a paltry $9,000.
Well, even worse today, that $9,000 ain't carrying anyway.
No, I agree in principle with the salary increases, in particular that of the Tobago House Assembly men and women. Because there are public officers who are working for more money in the TRHA than secretaries.
Right.
And the secretaries are supervising them.
Right.
You have the chief administrator working for more money than the secretary.
Right.
And the chief administrator has to take instruction from certain secretaries as the case may, in terms of the policy development aspect, not direct chain of command.
Right.
But she takes in this case, she takes an instruction from the chief secretary. So there is an imbalance in terms of rank, head of division, administrative position, policy making position. And you have people working, doctors, for instance, work for significantly more money than secretaries. So it has generally been a principle in collective bargaining that the supervisor should receive more money than the person who he supervises or who he makes policy for. So in the case of the Tobago House of Assembly secretaries, or the case of the Tobago House Assembly, the increases are totally and wholly justified, as far as I can read it.
Okay.
Now let's move to the ministers and the prime ministers, prime minister and the and upper echelons of the society. But let me deal with the judges, because it is proposed that the judges of the industrial court will not get an increase. In fact, it seems to me that they will have even a cut in their allocation. No, that is absolutely untenable. It's absolutely unacceptable. And that is why I said that these commissioners have not walked the sands of labor. They don't understand the pain of workers, not that the judges are workers. They don't understand, perhaps some of them don't understand what it is to lose a job, or you can't meet the supermarket properly. You can't have a salary that is dignified in terms of your position and all of that. So they don't understand negotiations, don't understand the pain of negotiating and so forth. So the Minister of Finance finally says to the CPO, a 4% increase 4%. Across the board. Now remember, the Minister of Finance took a lot from us in the country. He took a lot from all workers and all sectors in this country.
Everybody.
The 4% actually is not an increase, because right now the inflation has already wiped it away.
Wiped it out.
So that on principle, the Prime Minister doesn't need a salary increase. The ministers of government don't need an increase. We're talking about need here now.
Need.
And if the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister and his Minister of Finance and the Cabinet sees it fit to pay public officers and other officers within the quasi-government sector and so forth a 4% increase, then on principle they should give themselves a 4% increase as well.
Correct.
How does it look? You know, there's a statement, how it gonna look? But how more than how it feels? What message are you sending? You want to cut judges' pay. You're giving yourself an increase because the cabinet eventually has to rule in it. So ostensibly, they're giving themselves an increase. While I understand the structure of how those things are done, where you have the commission is there in the middle to say, well, it is we giving you the increase.
Yeah, they
but Parliament eventually
they agree to it.
Determines whether they're going to accept it or not.
Yes.
So that anywhere you walk in Trinidad or Tobago, nobody agrees that ministers of government can have such large increases. The Prime Minister gets such large increases, and you only are giving us 4%. That even if you award it and we accept it now, the inflation has wiped it away.
Yeah.
So it is really they have the temerity and the gall to accept such significant and large increases. Is totally untenable, is totally unacceptable. However, I want to remind the nation, because of the history of the Tobago House of Assembly men, where the commission doesn't understand the structure, the governmental structure of this country. Even on the what you call the protocol list, secretaries are way down. They have to understand that the secretaries are maybe second tier within the governmental structure of Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, when you treat a secretary in a way that doesn't recognize that doesn't speak to that, then we know that you don't have understanding of the governmental structure of Trinidad and Tobago. So that a secretary is comparable, if you look at the legislation in the Tobago House Assembly, is almost exact wording to that in the Constitution, where it pertains to a minister in respect of the discharge of his duties and policy in respect of the discharge of his duties. So you can't treat a secretary, and where you actually pay parliamentary secretaries almost, well, in some cases more than a secretary.
No, well, it is more.
It is more than a secretary.
Yeah.
And therefore, it is unacceptable. And I believe that the secretaries should be brought up on par with a minister of government.
Because currently
they see the assembly, the assembly as a ministry. So you have the chief secretary having the same salary as a minister of government, and then you treat the other secretaries as if they're nothing. So that I think that there needs to be a revolution in the thinking of the parliament. We don't have to wait for the legislation to come in terms of Tobago's autonomy to pay secretaries. And we're not even so sure whether the Trinidadians who populate the Salary Reviews Commission understand this and what they are going to even recommend in the future. But a secretary shouldn't get the same salary as a government minister, because they're in charge of policy, they're in charge of divisions, and they're the head of the administration under the divisions in Tobago.
Right.
Tobago is half of the nation. We are talking about a semi-autonomous body, and so forth. So I think in the case of the Tobago House of Assembly in particular, the increases are justified.
Okay.
However, I think it is almost, I can use the term, egregious act for, if they're going to do it, for the government and the parliament to pass, or well, the cabinet to accept those increases and pay themselves ostensibly those hefty increases. I don't think they need it. Look at the man who works on the road, he still lives. He's eking out a living. And you're way up there. You give other persons 4%.
4%.
Take the 4% for yourselves and we could understand it. But I think it's wholly and totally unjustified where the cabinet, if the cabinet accepts those increases,
right,
is totally offensive.
And you spoke about the inflation already eroding the 4% even before, because we would have already had numerous increases in gas, and that it wasn't brought on by any international pressure. That was literally the Minister of Finance saying we're removing the subsidy that we had before.
Yes.
And artificially carrying up the price.
Yes.
Right? And that in itself would have resulted in so much inflation over the past couple of years. And on top of that, now we would have had...
Well, that even extended to the cost of doing business.
Correct, right?
Because you have businessmen like myself have to pay more at the pump. You have to, in terms of transportation costs, that is passed on to the merchants, that those costs onto the consumer.
And energy generally affects the price of everything.
Yes.
Right? So once energy goes up, everything goes up. Goods and services goes up.
Indeed.
Generally. And then, of course, we had the international pressures that was coming in for the fallout from COVID and having the supply chain issues and everything. And so we saw, in some cases, price, especially price of food, going up almost 30% over the past couple of years.
And we already have, if for want of if we want to remember that Tobagonians generally live 30% higher than our Trinidad counterparts, because by the time goods are transferred here, imported here, and the businessmen add on the percentage for
there's a premium there.
There's of course, so that you find we are in a situation already very, 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 very disadvantaged, and then the gas prices and all the other attendant increases. We are Tobagonians virtually suffer in respect of the increases that the Minister of Finance will hand down on the nation from time to time. But getting back to the issue, I think the trade unions are waiting on the Prime Minister
to make a statement.
I think the working class of this nation are waiting on the cabinet to see whether or not they're going to really accept those increases. I think they might be in for a very, 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 very important surprise if they were to accept the increases proposed by the Salary Reviews Commission of Trinidad and Tobago. And
we would have had a number of unions and bodies would have accepted that 4% because of the hard line the CPO took with instruction from the Minister of Finance.
Exactly.
That 4% is a figure that we're not going over. All right? And so you would have had prisons, you would have had tutor, you would have had
I think the postal union,
police. So many institutions and unions took that 4% with the understanding, hey, they're bawling and they cry. We do have the money. And the back pay that they don't want to pay as well. Because that back pay went back to what, 2014? 2014, I believe, because I think teachers got back pay back to 2014. Right? And they sat down with the understanding, okay, we will take it because it's better than nothing.
Well, sometimes too, when negotiations are ongoing, the general principle is that, and if you look back at the history of salary increases for public officers in the country over the last 2 decades or 3 decades or so, when the economy is in a cyclical downturn, you find that trade unions are weaker and the increases are generally suppressed. When the economy in a cyclical upturn, trade unions tend to see that, and they generally tend to get larger increases. For the last 20 years or so, trade unions have not had the bargaining strength to tackle the CPO and to tackle the governments over the last 2 decades or so. You found that the militancy of workers has not been as strong as it used to be. You don't find public officers coming out in large numbers, and it's not only apathy. I think that people sometimes don't see their efforts bearing fruit. The people who grew up in the Butler days in the 90s and the early 2000s, much of them have left the public service. Trade unions are not what they used to be. And then you have over the years a large and significant influx of workers on contract.
Yes.
It might be perhaps now about 60% of the workforce.
Right.
People are very fearful. And the judges in the industrial court has been the last bastion of hope and protection in the struggle against government excess and excess governmental abuse of power and authority by governments over the years. And
because they are the only arm of government that's not in the government per se.
So it's a frontal attack on the working class. It's a frontal attack on judges in the industrial court.
Yes.
Where we saw in January, I think it is, or late December, when the tenure of the president of the court, she was virtually dismissed. Her contract wasn't renewed.
Right.
That sent a certain kind of signal. The government is saying to judges, we can remove you if you don't toe the line.
Right.
This proposed reduction of the judges of the industrial court salaries.
And judges are on contract. I thought judges
they have no tenure.
Until...
No, they have no tenure. It's not like judges in the criminal jurisdiction and civil jurisdiction.
Okay.
So that has been so for as long as I could remember.
Okay.
When I was a labor student, those were some of the things we had to research, and the trade unions always rallied against it. But even though Dr. Eric Williams would have, in his wisdom, but he was under pressure to, but in his wisdom, ensured that the industrial court was established, the ISC, and then the Industrial Relation Act. In that sense, he learned to govern without restriction. And he passed those laws in Parliament. Perhaps when George Weeks and those guys were there, Aaron MacLeod and these guys, and Butler and all those guys coming down, Joe Young and these trade unionists and so forth. So they were very strong personalities, and the working class was very militant. But nonetheless, Dr. Williams and his team over those years passed significant laws protecting the working class. Now you have this present administration trying to demilitarize, if you wish, the working class, trying to put them under significant pressure financially and even in terms of court judgments. I recall WASA was given an increase with interest. And of course, during COVID, the president of the court came out and said, listen, you are adding a new term and condition of employment, and you just can't do that. It will be unilateral. And therefore, you cannot come out and say that workers will be locked out if they don't take the job.
Right.
I think that offended the prime minister to the hilt, and the working class and the employer class, who have important friends in the cabinet. So I think they had it in for the president of the court. That's my view, and I think my view is correct. So that it's an assault on the working class, and where the suppression of the salaries of judges, particularly those of the industrial court, is unacceptable. So that again, the working class should look at those things.
Yes.
I always believe that any government that is not in support of the working class is no government. And I always have this mantra that the working class before party, because when parties go there, they forget the working class, they forget where they came from.
Yeah.
And they pass policies, develop policies that tell us that they have forgotten the working class. And that is unacceptable.
What about, for the first time in history, if this is passed, that the head of government, or the head of the parliament, chief prime minister, would be earning more than the president in terms of salary? So currently, the president just earns about $5,000 in salary, about $5,000 more than the prime minister. And to this, if this recommendation goes forward and accepted, the prime minister will now earn about $6,000 more than the president monthly.
Sometimes you don't know where these people's heads are. They don't know what they are doing. I can't see the president getting less money than the prime minister. That alone tells you the commission doesn't understand its work and doesn't know what it is doing. A bunch of them should be dismissed.
Right.
The entire bunch of commissioners on the salaries review commission should be dismissed, even for submitting such a nonsensical provision in the first place. How could you provide, unless there's something coming afterwards that we don't know? Right. Because who appoints you can control you. Yeah. True. And a lot of things are whispered in the back rooms and so forth, and so you never can tell what is going to come. So that they might say, well, accept this, and then we'll carry up the salary of the president afterward. Perhaps that's the thinking. We don't know. But on the face of it, it tells us that they know what they're doing by that particular recommendation. Right. Just as viewers are coming online, perhaps again to say, I, on principle, don't believe that he who supervises should get less than who he supervises. Yeah. And therefore, on that principle, I can accept the increases. However, to reiterate, the prime minister, and I'm not speaking about Rowley, Prime Minister Rowley, I'm saying whoever's the prime minister doesn't, and the present leader of the opposition, they don't need that kind of money. I mean, people who work at the lower level, they are living, not so. They have drive regular cars.
I mean, this is also in addition to the taxes and the duties they get off on the vehicles they buy and all these different things. It's tend to be a lot of that. Sometimes I think it's very excessive in comparison to what it is that the working man in Trinidad and Tobago has to work for.
No, well, you see, the public service has an history in terms of its remuneration structure, right? So let's take somebody at the lowest end of that infrastructure or that the country's public organization chart, so to speak. So let's agree that the lowest person is a janitor or cleaner or handyman, as the case may be. So when salaries have been agreed upon through the collective bargaining process over the years, you find that there's normally a 2-point salary rate. And as you go up, you might have 2 more points, 3 more points, 4 more points, as the case may be. And a salary, so you have a salary range, whether it's A to E or G, as the case may be. So you have salaries that are placed on that scale and on those points. And so you go right up to the level up to the prime minister, right? So it is not fair to say that they are working for too much. But what I'm saying, in the context of the economy, right, and the fact that you can award public officers only a paltry 4%, and then you're going on to increase yourselves by so much in an economy that you say that is not so wholesome, right? And you're giving public officers and across the board a paltry 4%, and then how does that look? Right. All right, and it's totally unacceptable. It sends the wrong message to public officers. People are going to say, well, you're paying yourself so much, so people are disincentivized to work, right, because we are working for so little, yet we have to live, pay our loans, pay our bills and so forth, go to universities, send our children to school, eat food, put food on the table.
Drive
at $6,000 and $10,000 and $15,000, and then you're going to go away with $80,000 and $90,000 a month and so forth.
The banks are profiting in the billions.
Notwithstanding having said that, I don't believe for one moment that somebody who I supervise should get more money than I receive per month.
Right.
As a matter of fact, on principle, this prime minister's salary should be even higher. But I'm saying that I don't accept the report in the context of the 4% and the economy.
Right.
Right. Because you have, for example, the CEO in TSTT, for instance, receives close to $200,000 a month, or somewhere in the middle there. You have people in Petrotrin and all those oil companies, WASA, doctors in the TRH receiving large sums of money. In some cases, more than secretaries and even the chief secretary. The medical chief of staff or a senior doctor in the TRH here to be will receive more money than the chief secretary.
Okay.
And therefore, how can that be? And in that context, listen to me carefully, in that context, salaries are justified. However, not acceptable because of the present state of affairs, and what they have paid out to public officers is just unacceptable.
So you're saying it would have been acceptable in a different time?
In a different time, and a different
circumstance
in terms of how the economy has functioned over the years.
Okay.
All right. And I'm going to reiterate, secretaries in the Tobago Assembly should be paid on par with ministers of government. They do the same thing, albeit you have more numbers on the other side. But the policy making is just the same way. The policy development is just the same way. The responsibilities are similar, not identical, but even identical in some cases. And therefore, secretaries in the Tobago House of Assembly should be paid better.
Right.
And for instance, I don't even receive a pension.
Right.
Where ministers of government who haven't served one term receive a pension. So there's a significant disparity where that is concerned. So I'm making the case.
So secretaries currently wouldn't receive a pension, would they?
If they serve, I think, a term and a half or 2 terms there.
Okay.
You have to do that. But the one-termers don't receive anything at all. One-termers as a minister, they receive a pension.
But if you serve
one-termers in the assembly don't receive a pension.
Oh, okay. And that's why we have you on the show, because you have the experience and the knowledge, right? So I was on LinkedIn. Yesterday, and I was looking about what the public had to say, or the professional class in Trinidad and Tobago had to say about the increases. One gentleman would have pointed out, and you would have juxtaposed the Prime Minister's salary to what somebody in the United States will get in terms of an engineer or a doctor. And when you really look at it, an engineer and a doctor in the United States will make generally more than what a prime minister would make here, right? But in my...
We're not cutting about how can he compare the United States with...
Yes, because I'm about to say United States is the most prosperous nation in the world. And so people there would, when you compare dollar to dollar to somebody, a developing country, of course they will get paid more in general. So I just wanted to ask you what your views on that was.
It's a bogus argument.
Yeah, I think it is as well.
It's a bogus argument.
So you want us to pay Dr. Rowley the same amount the United States president getting, or what the United States vice president would get, which is I think is about $250,000 a month or something in US dollars. That is insane. They bankrupt the government. You have to compare the standard or the cost of living in the two countries. A dollar wherever you go. They say
it's a different remunerative structure.
Yeah, it is.
So you can't compare, and the economy is different.
The economy is totally different.
I mean, it's an affluent nation, and therefore things are going to be different.
Yeah,
the guy's a fool.
Yeah. All right, so we finally got Mr. Wadahead to jump on. Mr. Wadahead, you hearing?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Wadahead, you hear? Again, an echo. Mr. Weatherhead?
Yes, I'm hearing you. Yes.
Yes, we're hearing you, Mr. Weatherhead, but your audio is quite low. Can we get the audio for Mr. Weatherhead a little higher?
Let me check.
Okay, all right. Mr. Weatherhead, just wanted to get your initial opinion, seeing that you just joined us the conversation. What is your initial opinion on the Salary Reviews Commission's report as they just submitted it a couple of days ago?
The thing is, there's a number of issues here, particularly the question of equity is involved. The Prime Minister and other persons, and this is not just about politicians. The Salaries Review Commission is created by the Constitution to review the salary for a number of different positions. Within the civil service, the highest positions would be permanent secretaries. And the Salary Reviews Commission determines the terms and conditions for the permanent secretaries. They also determine for certain heads of department and certain senior positions. Now, I want to make it clear that there's a difference between the civil service and the public service. The civil service is part of the public service. The public service includes the civil service, the teaching service, the fire service, the police service, and the prison service. All these are services which are appointed by service commissions. And outside of the persons under the SRC, the others have the right to collective bargaining with the CPO to determine terms and conditions. So the situation is that the government has offered everyone below the level of permanent secretary or head of department, everyone below those positions for which the SRC determines the terms and conditions, 4%. And they have not received a pay increase from 2013 to now. Similarly, the persons under the SRC will say they have not received a salary increase for some time. But they have also received in recent times, a couple of years ago, an increase in their pensions, their pension arrangements. So that the question is, if at the top of the civil service, for example, or the different services that make up the public service, the SRC is determining the salaries and other perks for the top, and the rest are being offered 4%. Now, this is not even talking about the Prime Minister, who is awarded a proposal of 34% increase. And so that the question of equity at the top and the bottom of the services, there's a widening gap between the top and the bottom. And this cannot be fair and just at all. I am not going to compare a civil servant with the Prime Minister. Let us deal with who is at the head of the civil service in terms of permanent secretaries. The one in the Prime Minister's office is also called head of the public service. And he is the top dog and receives the top salary within the service. So if you are offering him more than 4%, then it means that that gap between all the clerical people, all the administrative people, all the technical and professional people in the service, and those positions is going to continue to widen. Now, that is one aspect.
Right.
In terms of the politicians, the political offices, the SRC has utilized what they call the Hayes Guide chart system in terms of doing the job evaluation. They hired a firm which has a new name. It was the Hayes Company, and it's changed its name, but it uses the same old Hayes Guide chart system, which is a point factor system, which is saying there are certain points, certain factors which we look at, and we attach points to those factors. One of the factors is, in respect of the politicians, accountability. Now, here we could compare the politician with the public officer. The public officer, in terms of accountability, has to undergo annual or even more regular performance appraisals, which determines whether they will get an increment or not. And they are subject to disciplinary process under the commission. The politician, including all the ministers, MPs, etc., those in the THA, those in local government, none of them is accountable in that way. Accountability, we are told, is that if they're not functioning, you could wait 5 years or 4 years or 3 years or how many years they're in office. And at the end of that, there would be what is called vertical accountability, that we could vote them out. Well, every single day that a public officer goes to work, he's facing the possibility that he may be charged for some disciplinary infraction. So even in that respect, there is no equity between the politician and the public officer in respect of accountability and the threats associated with accountability.
Right.
So the question here is that this SRC is doing this report, making a proposal. The proposal goes to the president, and then it goes to the cabinet, and then it goes to the parliament. And the very same politicians, the MPs, who are part of this report and whose terms are being proposed, are the ones who are going to decide whether they're going to be accepted or not, whether they're going to be adjusted or not. So they are in a privileged position compared to every other employee in the country. They are the only ones who can determine their own pay.
Max, you ever get a boss that give you an increment and then tell you say to accept it or not? If that ever happened to you?
Well, it couldn't happen.
Need to tell me what the increment is. You had to accept. You paying yourself. I never said that happen before. Never said that happen.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Weatherhead. Mr. Weatherhead, hear me or had anything else to say? All right, so you see
So that is
okay.
the question there. Now, even those who are subject to collective bargaining, recently you would have seen that a debate was restarted in respect of the what they call the integrity testing bill, which includes lie detector tests and other tests to determine the integrity of certain public officers. Now, that includes drug tests as well. In every employee in the world, testing of that kind of nature is a term and condition of employment. And it is subject to collective bargaining. But here we are using the parliament to try and impose this on people. They will say, well, we're just choosing some select people who are important in national security terms. But the fact is, you are imposing on people who are subject to collective bargaining by law, by parliamentary action, terms and conditions. And on the other hand, when it comes to emoluments, the salaries and perks, you are deciding your own, and at the same time, you are offering the people who are in the service, various services, a meager 4% after 7-8 years. And if the special tribunal has its way, you will get that 4% over 10 years, because they want to treat two periods in which the law says that they can make an award for a minimum of 5 years each. Now that matter is before the court right now, challenged by the PSA, and but the court has said it will give a decision sometime in April. So we'll see what it says. But so far, the government has been able to pressure all the other unions and associations in the public service to accept the 4%. And if you recall, there was an injunction against Twitter from taking any industrial action.
Yes.
So that is a whole different kettle of fish from the politicians themselves now being able to decide their own salaries and terms.
I wanted to ask
while
Max
they
this
want
question.
to impose terms on.
Max, I'm looking at, because the salaries and especially in the THA here are very forward facing, well, public facing, is a public facing figure. So the public generally knows how much an assemblyman or a secretary or a chief secretary would earn. We had a guest on before, Mr. Philip, who would have said, we're seeing a lot of persons looking to take office now, and the motivation is not to serve, but the motivation is more so to see what they could gain in terms of monetary compensation and everything like that. And the job, I wouldn't say the job is incredibly easy to get, but however, it's not a job where you go, you get an interview, and you come back, you get an interview again and all of that, as everybody else goes through, or in a job where you have to have specific amount of experience and demonstrated experience for you to get. It's a job where you need to campaign and get by people basically believing in what you campaign on the campaign trail. And then on top, you get in there and you get this salary now that is up and above what the regular man earns. And what I wanted to ask you now is this, can you see the amount of this kind of incentivizing the wrong type of persons to want to get into to public office for money, as opposed to serving the people that put them there?
Because
Mr. Phillips said politics is a hustle. He says a hustle. So I wanted to ask the question.
I don't believe in people who are charlatans and jokers, and people who use cliche language to make a point.
Mm-hmm.
The man doesn't know what he's saying. He doesn't understand the history of the development of salary increases vis-a-vis what politicians get from public officers get, what WASA workers get, and line minister gets and gets and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The fact of the matter is like a cooperative. People of common purpose form themselves into a party who believe that on a philosophy, on an ideology that, listen, we can change things, so let us form ourselves into a group.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it's a political party. to use the argument that they're only doing that because the salaries might be good is nonsensical. It is illogical. For the most part, as far as I have been a secretary, I've been a trade union officer, I have my own business and so forth. But people have to be paid properly.
Right.
But the basis, as far as I remember, that people form themselves into parties in an attempt to make the country in which they live better.
Right.
To say that they only do that to steal or to get a better salary. There are some people who would do much better off in their own private businesses than the public office pay. So what are we to believe? Somebody who just talks and talks nonsense and cause other people to believe in the nonsense, and you have a lot of nonsense being spewed in this society, a lot of foolish arguments, that's not good argumentation. It is not logical. Where does he guess how he knows what people think? That is just his own personal nonsensical view that says people get into politics and they get a job as a salary because as a secretary because they want money. I could tell you most of the persons who are there now can get better jobs, better paid jobs than the job of a secretary.
Okay.
There are a number of them. So how is going to supplant or overturn that argument?
That logic.
It's not even. It's not. It's a fact. It's not even illogical logic. He's been illogical because the fact is that, just to repeat, there are a number of secretaries and ministers of government who can get better jobs than what for better pay than for what they get as a minister or a secretary. We have to begin to eschew and to reject those nonsensical conversation in the public. It doesn't help. You turn the public against people who are willing to serve and say, okay, you only want to be a secretary to get money. These people can do better. These people can set up their business and make more money in 2 or 3 days than what they can make as a secretary. What nonsense is that? So we have to begin to re-educate the people and don't allow that kind of conversation to seep into the media and cause public and social dissent than is necessary. We already have so much trouble in it than to break down a minister, bring down a secretary. And I always tell these fellas, all of us went to school and sit down on the same benches, and if my parents stood by me and I did my work and got my degree and whatever else I got, I'm not talking about me personally, and I come out better than you, why make that ungodly charge against me because I'm working as a secretary? These people are professionals. Every member of the President Assembly team are professionals in their own right, deserving of more money than they get.
Right.
I understand the point I'm making.
Yes, I got you.
But again, as Clyde also put it, I want to refrain for those who have just come in, from the janitor right up to the Prime Minister, there are certain gaps or ranges, points in the salary scale that must be maintained, except people can, by better collective bargaining power or strategy, can make more money in some areas than other areas, right? But after you've put the public under so much pressure, so much nonsensical decisions in terms of COVID, people lost their jobs, people lost their businesses, and then you're increasing your pay. We can't accept it. So let us say we will accept it if you pay yourself 4% too.
Yeah.
And let us maintain the differentials, called differentials, between the different posts in the public service. There's always been a certain kind of differential. But those people who sit on the commission, they have never, as I said before, they never walked the sands of Scarborough. They never walked the sands of Labrie. They never stood up, in any public space, and police hold you and you run and you have to do all sorts of things to get by and to get a better PD and better terms and conditions of employment. But yet you're going to take such an egregious action against the public and the public officers by paying yourself so much money.
Right.
It's not acceptable. But I'm saying the principle is that he who supervises should get more than who he supervises.
Yes, the subordinate.
All right? However, in this particular case and this particular time, I think it would be foolhardy for the Prime Minister to set his pay and give that kind of increase himself when he has caused havoc on the people of this nation.
Wanted to ask Mr. Weatherhead. Mr. Weatherhead, you there? Mr. Weatherhead?
Yeah, you hear me?
Yes. So, Mr. Weatherhead,
The increases.
seeing that, or you wanted to add to what Mr. James was just saying?
Because one of the arguments for these increases for those senior political positions is that is to dissuade people from getting involved in corruption. That you pay them better so they wouldn't think about thieving the government money.
Like greed have a limit.
To apply that argument to them. But for the people who work in the public service implementing their policies, you say, well, here's how we can prevent you from getting corrupt. We won't pay you more. We're going to impose so-called integrity testing on you.
Right.
And we're going to keep your salary in such a position that you could only live from paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
So it's a different thinking
So it's rules
about
for
people
not for
who
me.
are serving in professional public service positions from those who are in political positions.
I have a question for you, Mr. Weatherhead. Seeing as though you are the former president of the PSC, the PSC, I must say, since the reveal of the report has been kind of quiet, and we know famously that they haven't accepted any offer from the CPO as yet, right? Seeing that you sat there in that position at one point in time, what would be in your opinion, I ain't saying that, this is what you think, this is what they should do. What you think should be the next move of the PSA? Producer, we're not hearing Mr. Weatherhead. Repeat what you just said, Mr. Weatherhead. We miss it.
Shut down the public service.
You had to repeat what you just said for me.
I said the best move would be to shut down the service until the government meets your demands. But that can't happen. When Tutor tried to take industrial action, the government took out an injunction against them and prevent them from taking industrial action. That is how the law is. The law says if you're a public officer, you're not a worker under the IRA, you have no right to strike. So what the PSA has done is challenge the position from the special tribunal, which says that we're dealing with 2 periods, and for each period we could give a minimum of 5 years. So we could give you a 10-year award at the end of the day. Now, when that position was put to different associations, some of them said, all right, we're going to accept the 4%. The PSA took the matter to court, and like I said earlier, the judgment is supposed to be delivered in April on that issue.
So they're quiet because they have a matter before the courts concerning the whole issue about the 10 years.
Yeah, that is the challenging the special tribunal position.
Right.
Now the question is, if the court comes and says the tribunal could do that, then there will be a time gap between whether the PSA will accept the 4% and what has happened with the service. So again, there will be a little disparaging thing there between the different services within the public service.
Okay.
So all how you look at it, this situation is creating inequity in all kinds of ways among and between the different arms of the public service and between the public service and the political directorate above it.
Right. And last point I wanted to touch on, we have not only this, the SRC would have recommended these increases in the face of the 4% that the public had to accept, but not only that, but there's also back pay that has to be factored into this, and that back pay would have been from the year 2020 until now. So we're looking at about 4 years of back pay for those positions, in addition to the increases. So for those who don't know or who wouldn't understand the concept of back pay, is that if they say that the salary would have started from the year 2020, then we have to look at the difference of what the new salary is, right? Which is in the case of the Prime Minister is 80,000 from 59,000, and the difference would have to be retroactively paid in a lump sum to the Prime Minister for covering the 4 years from 2020 until the current year, which is 2024. All right. So I just wanted to get the opinion on the back pay aspects as well. Not only we had these increases, but there's back pay involved as well. Mr. James.
Well, I mean, if the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister they are saying the country cannot pay more than 4%, because it's going to be a significant financial strain on the country, and you are poised to accept such an increase, and by extension, such a back pay, then the country just can't afford it as well. So you can't preach one thing and then do another thing. All right? And it is, if they're going to do such a thing, it's telling me that you are saying one thing for public officers, but you are saying another thing for yourself.
Right.
And therefore, I mean, it is unjust. It is plain wicked. It is plain unconscionable. And it sends the wrong signal to everyone in this country.
Right.
As a former trade unionist and due to start my own trade union in a few weeks' time, I will see, because Clyde was one of those trade union officers that taught us the way, that took us and guided us, and we all went our ways and developed our own strengths. So we understand what it is and how to fight for workers, and so that workers generally in this country can have a better day. And we have to say, party or no party, that this is wrong. We have to tell whether PNM or TPP, whoever is in power, you are wrong. And workers must know who stand for them and who stand against them.
Right.
It seems to be, to me, as it is in the country now, that all the political parties are taking actions that tell workers who voted for them that they didn't really care about them.
Yeah.
And therefore, there are times when you have to choose between your own personal development and your personal security, as opposed to a party who doesn't do the things that can benefit you. And there's where we stand in the country. Workers have to decide between themselves and the party.
Would that mean, question?
Yes.
Would that mean that if the back pay goes back to 2020,
It's an enormous back pay.
Yeah,
The country can't afford it.
but does also that mean, in the case of the THA, that the persons who would have been in power, so I think
Will
PNM
also
would
get
have
a back
been-
pay?
They'll also get back pay for that year?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So you're talking like people like the former chief secretaries,
Right.
like Ansel Dennis, Kelvin Charles, and secretaries in that,
They will get
they also get a
back pay.
And there's no problem with that. As I said, I'm differentiating between the ministers of government and the prime minister, and having regard to the history of the remuneration package of secretaries. I think Tobagonians must understand and know what their social and socio-political position is in this country, the socio-political infrastructure architecture in Tobago. The secretaries are not paid properly.
Right.
and they should be paid akin to ministers. Now, people in Trinidad may not
They
like
don't
to
want to
hear
hear
that, because they believe the country is theirs, and the country only its own concerns ministers and the cabinet. But unfortunately or fortunately, depends on where you stand, we have Tobago House of Assembly. We have Tobago, which is half of the nation,
Right.
and a bigger half of the nation, if you were to be on own technically, and were to be awarded justly what our fair share of the economic pie, and our territorial waters and so forth. We produce much more. We are larger because of Tobago. But the country must understand that secretaries and the Tobago House of Assembly architecture or infrastructure or composition, political position in the country is just below that of the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago because of the law.
Right.
But the roles and functions of a minister are similar and in some cases identical to that of a secretary.
Right.
And therefore the remuneration package must reflect that understanding.
Right. Okay. All right, Mr. Weatherhead, Mr. James, I want to thank you both for coming on tonight and having this discussion again. Always a pleasure to have you guys on with the wealth of knowledge that you have in industrial relations and labor. All right. And so again, I thank you so much for coming on and enlightening the public on your opinions for what this Salary Reviews Commission had revealed. All right. But in general, we always have to take into consideration how the people feel about the people who put you there, as Mr. James said, how the people who put you there feel about the actions that you take and what you do for yourself when you get there. All right. And that will ultimately determine your sentiment amongst the people, because as the chief secretary, they never stop campaigning. When they're inside, they never stop campaigning, and people are looking at all of these things in retrospect. And we are people, they think we forget, but we don't forget. We just store, right? We store the information to use it at the opportune time, and that opportune time usually just be election time. All right, right, but all that being said, I want to thank you for coming on. Tobago, I want to continue to tell you, mind your business, continue to look at us as we speak about your business. All right, so, but until then, until next week, I'll bid you adieu. I'm Edison Thomas. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.